You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is sponsored by Codifi, a California benefit corporation. Visit Codifi at www.codifi.com. Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 50. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Chris Sims. On today's show, we talk about the Codifi booth at SAA 2017 in Vancouver, Canada, and all the awesome that went with it. Let's get to it. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. Chris Sims, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, good to talk to you again after, like a day and a half of being apart.
Yes, so we're recording this actually just a couple days after the SAAs ended, the Society for American Archaeology Conference, and we drove up to Canada, which we'll get to later, and then separately, Chris drove with the Codifi team and Coda team, who we'll talk to in a second here, and my wife and I drove up, and we had the entire exhibit booth in the back of our truck. We went to Vancouver, Canada, for the 82nd Annual Society for American Archaeology Conference. But to help us talk about that, and to talk about Codifi and the amazing booth that we had, the game-changing booth that we had, we're bringing on Mr. Codifi himself, which is a term I've just coined, because I think that's a new one. Gandalf the Grey Card or Mr. Codifi? I'm not really sure which one we're going to go with. But Michael Ashley, how's it going?
Let me Dr. Codifi to you.
Shit. Oh, shit. It's the first time he's doctored us.
Well, right after the SAAs, I feel like that's an important thing. But nice. Hey, guys. Yeah, we are recovered. I think I went to sleep last night around 8 p.m. after all the driving, and got up this morning and did yoga and crushing all the things just to recover from all the driving. But it was great. So
nice,
it was a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, this is as a West Coast SAA. I mean, typically they're closer. However, Canada wasn't like crazy close. I think for both of us, it was about a 15-hour drive if you go straight through. But we both did it in 2 days on both ends. And then you picked up Chris Sims in Portland on your way up, since it was pretty much right on the way. So had a lot of personal time together, and then we all shared a house, an Airbnb. Can't say enough about Airbnb. Michael and I have used it quite a bit. We should have them on to talk on a podcast sometime, because I think more shovel bums should use it, honestly. But
yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, man. The drive up was pretty easy for me.
Nice. So yeah, drive up, getting into Canada, super easy. Shockingly, getting out of Canada was just as easy. I didn't think Trump would let any of us in, but I mean, I have a slight tan, so I didn't think I'd get back in the country. So yeah, but anyway, no, it was great. So let's dive right in and talk about the booth. So we had booth 422. I was putting that hashtag on all the tweets I was sending out, and the booth, the nuts and bolts of it is the booth was actually Codifi, and then we had Codifi was probably half of it, probably like right on the real visible side, and then APN and PCS were also there, because Michael and I and Chris, we all feel pretty passionate that these three things need to be conceived of together: the training, the doing, and the outreach, and all that stuff. And if you're not thinking about these things together at the same time as you're doing the other things, then you're doing it wrong, quite frankly. I'm just going to say it. I mean, there are multiple ways to do things, but I feel like if you're not constantly concerned with how you're doing archaeology, the training for how to do archaeology, and then telling people about archaeology, then you're missing one piece of this this trifecta. So Michael, why don't you, I've talked enough, why don't you talk about the booth a little bit and your perceptions of it, because we talked a lot about setting it up. What is your, just walking into the exhibit hall and seeing all the booths? Because I think you're a good one for this, because while we talked about the setup, you were on child duty while we were mostly setting it up. So you came in and we'd already had the basic layout, to our vision that we talked about for weeks ahead of time. We'd already had the basic layout conceived of. So what was your first impressions on seeing our booth and how it compared to others?
Yeah, it's true. In order for us to actually be able to pay for this whole thing, I had to be a babysitter. Oh, wait, no, that wasn't my job. We brought our 5-year-old Ignazio up, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then when we got there, they have this weird safety thing about not wanting forklifts to run over children.
Yeah, crazy.
Well, yeah, I guess I'd want to say, I mean, just to make it slightly more meta, I mean, we started doing, as having gone doing all the 15-minute paper stuff and being on the committees and all those things we're still doing, forums, etc. But started trying to be in the exhibit hall space back in 2011. In fact, we should also do a shout out to CODA, since it was the Center for Digital Archaeology's um, basically it started at the SAA in Sacramento in 2011. Um, so, and what happened back then was there would be like maybe one other thing on the floor that had anything to do with digital anything.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, I'm still blown away by how little there still is, but at least there is more. So Chris Webster's vision, was kind of to have a space, one day when we have, I guess, all of the funding, to be much more of an interactive place where you could come and learn and do and talk all at the same time, and that's the ultimate goal. But what we did, which is pretty genius, was set this booth. So booths at the SAA are little, 10 by blocks in lines like any other conference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what we did is we bought 4 of those, what they call an island. and then we had all this space without any structure. And so what we did is we set the backdrop of the booth off at an angle. And what was so cool when I first walked in was like all the way from the entrance door, you could see the Codifi sign all the way across the room.
Mm-hmm.
We also, the kind of happy accident of being the very last people to buy booths at the SAA is we had what would have been constituted the worst spot. It just turned out to be exactly next to both the poster session and the CRM Expo. So we actually wound up having, from our strategic perspective, probably the absolute best spot. But the reality is, I'm sure we'll get into this, there was simply just no lack of people coming by.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got some feedback, some frustration for people, simply because we were overwhelmed by how many people came by.
Yeah.
And so like I had a list of people I still am following up with, that we just didn't get to talk to. So I loved the design. I thought it was fantastic, doing all the things together. I intentionally kept bringing people around, and circling, and it was a blast.
Plus, we had a couple other details too that I think when you go to something like this, the exhibitors out there and the vendors, they think about the one-way interaction of vendor to customer, and they don't really. And this is not a slight on any of the other vendors there. There was a lot of people, a lot of really great things, but the way they set up their tables is very structured, so that relationships doesn't get muddied, doesn't get changed at all. So you have a table between you and your customer, and you're actually actively trying to sell them something. And while we want to pay our bills, and while we are actually selling something, we were a vendor there. There's no question there. We were more than that, which is why we set up the booth this way. So on the corner, we had a couple of high tables and chairs that we didn't have a sign for, but we were just calling the Codifi Lounge or the Codifi Cafe. They were like cafe tables, and it was really just a place for people to come, sit, and relax. They didn't have to talk to us. They didn't have to do anything. They could have a piece of our candy. They could take some stickers. We had some flyers out on the table, or they could just sit there and escape from the conference for a minute. And while they did that, another thing that we had was what we called device daycare. So everybody's tablets and phones are always dying during the conference. So we had a place where you could come over, plug it in. We would watch it because it's right between our stuff and our computers. And your device would be safe and charging, and you could sit in the lounge. You could go walk around the exhibit hall, do whatever you want. That didn't really catch on Thursday because people didn't really know about it. But by Friday, we almost always had at least a couple devices in the box for device daycare, and there was almost always somebody sitting at the tables. And like I said, they weren't even customers. They were friends. They were people who were at the conference just sitting down and relaxing, and that's what we wanted. We wanted the entire booth to have that kind of relaxing atmosphere, because going digital and doing all the things is stressful for people in 2017 right now as we make this transition. So as much as we can make people comfortable, we did, which is another reason why we had, our booth was large. It was the largest booth there, except for the Routledge booth, who also had an island, but theirs was just all books around the edge. but you could come into ours. We didn't have any tables that were blocking access. We had some tables around with some information on them, but there were, I'd say if we had, let's see, probably 20, 40, 60, 80 feet of perimeter, probably 60 feet of that was open access that you could just walk right into and come and check out our booth. And that was probably one of my favorite aspects about the whole setup. Chris, what about you? What are your thoughts on it? Do you talk to anybody about our booth, or what did you think?
Yeah, well, I guess just to kind of parrot what you were saying, like on Thursday, I had a lot of traffic, and like Michael would ask me at the end of each day, how'd it go? Because Michael was busy doing all the things, and you'll cover that in a second. But like Thursday, I was exhausted just from everybody coming by, saying hi, and just being like, what is this? And so, I had to explain over and over and over again, like, all right, here's what Codifi is. We do this thing. Here's what APN is. We do this thing. Here's PCS. We do this thing. And, it was kind of like I could see the gears turning in a lot of people's heads, and I could also see the fuses blowing in a lot of people's heads. Like, what? Why is all this stuff together?
Yeah.
And so, like you had said, Friday, though, it was exhausting, but in like an incredibly positive way, because people were coming by Friday and Saturday all day long going, hey, I've got an idea for you. Hey, tell me about this thing. And so it was a much more interactive thing. And the way you described our whole like mode of communicating with people who came by our exhibitor booth, that was a really great way to explain that. And the layout was very open, and so that's one of those things that, I don't know, for me, I get a little uncomfortable around like the publishing companies booths, just because they always set it up in kind of like a U shape, or even like a box shape. And so you enter the box, and then everybody is inside the box trying to look at all the books, and it's kind of claustrophobic. But ours was very open, very relaxing, and that was all by design. And that was your brainchild. You really killed it with that. And so it was just great. I ended up snagging tons of podcasts with people, and I'm incredibly appreciative of all the time that I got from people who were incredibly willing to share their work and share their ideas. And it was really nice, because it was, while SAA is an incredibly exhausting experience for everybody involved, it was also great to feed off of all the enthusiasm and energy of people. And I got a lot of positive feedback saying that they really enjoyed our booth. They were stoked for what we're doing on all three fronts with Codifi, APN, and PCS. And it ended up developing a lot of really productive collaborative experiences. So I got like a three-way collaboration with Go Dig a Hole, Women in Archaeology, and Steven from CRM Archaeology. We sat down with Ruth Tringham and recorded a fantastic podcast that's going to come out next Thursday. And then I also met up with another podcaster, Daniel Kwan, who's got the Curiosity and Focus podcast, and recorded 4 or 5 episodes with him. And it was just it was a lot of work and a lot of energy, but it was really fulfilling and energizing at the same time.
Yeah, indeed. So, I mean, you're right. All these things were great, man. It was just, I'm a little overwhelmed just trying to think back on it now. All the things that we did and talked about.
Yeah.
But of course, the biggest thing that we had there was Codifi. Codifi was the dominating force of that entire booth, and by design. And it's so when I say Codifi too, on the Codifi side, I mean the photo boards that we had for sale, and I also mean the Codifi system, with the tablet and the software and the whole thing. So we're probably going to spend most of the time talking about that. I've got some show notes about things we're going to talk about, and I think I want to move photo boards to right now in the last few minutes of this conversation, so we can spend segment 2 really talking about Codifi and its response, from not only people that we're familiar with. We saw some old friends there, but Also, Canadians, lots of Canadian firms that stopped by and that were just like, wow, there's nothing like this and blah, blah, blah. Of course, we hear the same thing from the U.S., but it was refreshing to hear that from an entirely different country and to hear all those things. But let's talk about the photo boards real quick, only because I forgot to do this just a couple days ago, but just before this podcast, as we're recording this on Tuesday, I updated the coupon code. So if you go to codify.com/APN, you can get 20% off for spring of all of our photo boards, and that's just for APN listeners. And the coupon code is APN Spring 20. So you type that in, and it's the current coupon code is always listed at codify.com/APN. So you can find out what that code is, but that code will get you 20% off. So let's talk about the photo boards real quick. Michael, you and I, we've been to, this was our 4th conference in 4 months, in 3 months, I think. And this is the first time
I don't know, I have to check in with the Journey songs soundtrack. But yeah, I think so.
Right? And this was the first time, I think because we got to drive, I didn't forget lots of things. I always had a lot of anxiety about some of our conferences because we had to take all our stuff on planes or had limited time or a limited size in our booth. But this time, we're bringing all the things, and Michael finally pounded it into my head to remember to bring artifacts. And when I say artifacts, these are artifacts to put on the photo boards so people can see exactly how we use them. We did have one comment that I heard of that somebody said, "Are these artifacts?" And my wife, who was manning our table there at the booth, she's like, "Yeah, they are." And she's like, "It's a felony to bring them across state lines." Well, okay, sure, that's right. However, just so everybody knows, they weren't like artifacts from a site that's listed anywhere. These were things we bought in like antique stores in Virginia City as teaching collections, as type specimens that we could actually take all kinds of places and do things with and not have to worry about, because there are literally 7 million Prince Albert tobacco tins, upright tobacco tins. So if this one got damaged at the conference, not that big a deal. So anyway, Michael, we're going to talk about Codifi after the break, but for now, photo boards, the response on photo boards was fantastic. Did you hear anything that was different before? We sold a lot to Mexico, I will say that, which is awesome.
Well, I mean, I will say that, since we designed it and I'm such a total snob about this stuff, to me, it was like, this was like, it's pretty transformative. Like I started to become a real believer in what we've done. Mm-hmm. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, but what you just said is the reason. Instead of just kind of talking about these things or showing them on a screen, we did 2 things I think that made a huge difference. One is we had a huge printout on the wall on our booth that showed kind of the before and after, and we had the opportunity to demo over and over with real things. So I kept demoing with this purple glass bottle. Yeah. And if you take an object like that and sit it on the ground and take a picture of it, it's going to turn the opposite of purple, because that's what happens is your camera sees all that purple and changes its color. And people could see right on, as we did it with the iPad, and I was using an iPad Pro, so I could do camera raw and do all the right stuff, and they'd see, wow, this is terrible and yet totally normal. Then we do the photo board, and they bounce off the photo board in the same lighting, and it was just obvious that it was totally working and great. I know you guys will talk a bit more about the other variations, but it is clear that a couple of things I've never gotten to say, now is the time. The first is the board is not made out of metal so that it can go through, so you can take it on an airplane without having to deal with any of those issues. Nor is it made out of wood, which was one of the very first materials we looked at. So it actually is completely waterproof. Mm-hmm. So we have a board that's waterproof, that's light proof. I mean, that has a lifetime warranty, that you can take out in the field, that's made out of high pressure laminate, that people were really loving, and that's super exciting. And of course, we'll keep making it better and better. But for us now, I mean, honestly, I can't even possibly imagine not photographing with some form of color balancing substrate. And the other thing I'll say is we clearly have a huge mission, a lot of interest around 3D. So, having, as we call the magic photo board, because it has the photogrammetry markers on the side, this is my segue back to you guys about the responses for lab boards and modified boards. So, so take it away.
Yeah. Well, I guess the two biggest things that I heard were we need a lab board, which means a board that's probably 4 times the size of our 12 by 10 by 12 large photo board, the Magic Photo Board, and with fewer markings on it, because they want to have fewer, if any, markings, quite frankly, on the front, because it sounds like people want to have their big space to do lab quality photographs of any size object that they can handle. Stick it into probably a light box or something like that, and then have their, be able to take their photos. So I'd like some feedback on that personally. You can comment on this episode. You can go to our ideas portal at ideas.codify.com and check that out, because I'd want to know, what would you want to see on the front? Do we need some sort of scale? Do we need anything? If it's down the bottom, what does that do to a photo right in the middle? I mean, all those sorts of details we'd have to work out on what would actually be on the lab board. So far, all we've heard is bigger, bigger.
Yeah,
But,
big and gray. I mean, it's funny because anyone who's ever dealt with production, like if you have the black velvet that looks really great, and you're dealing with any form of artifact that has any form of dirt on it, you're dead. I mean, you just clean that thing all day long. That's one thing. But for sure, we're going to have 2 boards I can guarantee you we'll have. One will be the large lab board, which will probably be some form of a rounded rectangular thing.
Yeah.
But we're also making a very large round, as in circular board that can go onto, well, the pejorative term, the lazy Susan, can go onto a carousel rotating stand that will have the photogrammetry symbology all the way around it, at either at 20-degree angle, 20-degree intervals, and therefore you can just rotate and take your photos, and you'll have the symbology there, and be able to produce 3D artifacts really easily. It'll be super cool. So both of those are coming for sure.
Yeah, then the other feedback, just from a sales perspective, was we've got the 4 by 6 inch sized board that has inches or centimeter scale on it, and the centimeter scale has been by far the dominant seller when people just buy one of the small boards. And we've got, like, for example, we've got a bunch of the inches boards left, not a bunch, but some. But the centimeter one has been the clear winner. So the idea is to either scale back production of the inches board and not make as many, or take one of 4 by 6 board and put inches and centimeters on it, and see if that'll help. Or maybe just keep the 2 separate boards, and like I said, we'll just carry fewer of the inches boards, because it seems like fewer people want them, and then go from there. So,
I mean, I would love to hear. We have ideas.codify.com, but I would love to hear, from people directly. What do you want? We'll certainly do some more stuff out in the socials, etc. But we have a phenomenal production team we're working with, and it's not that we on the one hand, it's we can kind of make everything, but it takes us a while because we really want to get it right. So we can't, therefore we can't make everything. We don't want to be one of those companies that has 57,000 variations, but we would love to hear what ideas you have, and then we'll make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Inventory is the kind of thing that we're not really interested in holding, like, lots of stuff in stock. We want to have what you want to have, and if you don't want to have it, then we're not going to make it anymore. So, yeah, agreed. All right, so go check out, like he said, and I said, ideas.codify.com. Leave us some feedback on this episode, or on Facebook, or the Codify Facebook page. Go to our website, submit a question through there, and let us know what you want. And we'll look at all the variables involved in making that, and then make it available. So, all right, so we're going to go to break, and when we come back in the second segment, we're going to talk all about Codify. That was the biggest reason we were at the conference, and the response was amazing. We'll talk about that in just a second.
Let's face it, the quality of archaeological field photography could really use some improvement. We aim to change this with the Codifi Magic Photo Board. This lightweight but incredibly durable board is designed to help you take color-perfect photos of artifacts, features, and sites using almost any camera, even your smartphone. You need to see it to believe it. Engineered from exceptional quality, color-safe, high-pressure laminate, Codifi Magic Photo Board is ready for tough field conditions. It's guaranteed to level up your photography. Start taking publication-worthy photos right in the field with the Codifi Magic Photo Board. Available now for pre-order. Visit codifi.com/APN. That's codifi.com/APN today and get your promo code exclusively for listeners of the Archaeology Podcast Network.
All right, we're back, and as promised before the break, we're going to talk about Codifi. We're going to devote this whole entire segment to Codifi. I wanted to slam all the other stuff into that first segment so we can get it out of the way. But Codifi is the reason we went to Canada. Codifi is the reason that, well, quite frankly, that we kind of get up in the morning at this point. But Codifi is not just software either. It's the name of the company, it's the brand, it's the hardware, and it's the software, and it's the full package. And this is why we went to Canada, and this is really what we were demoing for people and showing people, and not just demoing, because the software, you know, it's at version like 9.9 point something. I mean, it's super close. It's so close. We're just down to the point where we're doing some bug testing this week, and you you always have to clear those little things out. It's just inherent in the software architecture and design process. So, we're plus Apple was nice enough to come out with version 10.3 right in the middle of us trying to finalize Codifi. So iOS 10.3. So there's inherently going to be some stuff that we got to work through there. But that's it. So Michael, you had a ton of meetings in Canada about Codifi, and not just with people from the United States, but with people from all over the world. Really, and we'll talk about that. And I just want to say I had a lot of conversations with people from Canada, from Canadian firms that were super excited by this. And there's no reason, it sounds like it's almost even easier than the United States. But it sounds like we can bring this to Canada really, really quickly and really easily. So what was your feedback from the conference regarding Codifi and all the amazing meetings that you had, Michael?
Yeah, so I will try to keep this quite as linear as I can. First of all, I want to say that I was invited to this session. It was a really great session by Rand Boytner and Peter Gould on how to fund archaeology and make it sustainable. And it was us and Dig Ventures out of the UK were the only two that really talked about ways of funding archaeology that aren't the usual thing, which is we all go to the same pond and try to drink the water and hope that we're going to get, the non-existent funding from the NEH. And then on the other side of it, CRM wasn't even mentioned at all in the funding conversation, which was kind of crazy. So, when we built this company, we're building a company that is a for-profit, but a benefit corporation that's dedicated to paperless archaeology and to understanding the actual costs of doing that. And Chris, you've been like beyond all about digital archaeology and paperless forever, but now we've found all these additional business cases. And so the reason I'm starting with that is because it was a transcendental moment for me throughout this whole time, because I had people coming up saying, clearly understanding the value proposition of what we're trying to achieve. And that is, number one, rent, don't own. Dealing with tablets is a nightmare. It's our nightmare. We want to take this on for you. And the software, and then there are other companies that are trying to just do software, and there's really great challenges with them and with just being a software company. We have to be archaeologists. We can't outsource this to the outside world, because what we do is actually, there are some very specific, unique things. And I will absolutely battle anyone that says that that's not true. We're doing something that's different than the way that we record, because we're dealing with cultural data. We're dealing with things that matter to people beyond compliance. So in a nutshell, to do the audible version of our elevator pitch, what Codifi now does is it can take any set of inputs that you need, what we typically would call your forms, transform that into actions that you can do in the field and after the field in publishing and all the other parts you need to do it, and then transform that data and those inputs into various templates, as we call them. So those can be forms, and it could be output as JSON or XML data, and ultimately shape files and all these things. And because it's actually real software now, we were able to put it into people's hands and go through it and demo it over and over and over and over. And the response was, when I say overwhelming, I mean, that's usually such a hackneyed way of saying it, but for me personally, it was, because we've been talking about this and trying to do this for 20 years. So that was amazing. I'll level this up just to take off on what you said, and then I really want to hear also from Chris Sims and your feedbacks. But so there's some huge projects happening in the UK right now, and to make it about Canada for a second, we have in Canada, you have provinces that have very specific ways of doing things, and there just happens to be less of them than we have with the 50 states in the US. But they also have mandates. So they, unlike what we have, they have like, this is what you're going to use. This is the software you're going to use. And it just turns out to be software that's compatible with what we do. Right. So we had people come up to us and say they want to be distributors of Codifi. We've had others that say they want to help manage all of the various aspects. And from a business case, what we did over the last year was all the actual negotiations. So we can, if there are firms or organizations or educational bodies in Canada or Scotland or Australia, it doesn't really matter, we can locally get the actual hardware there without having to ship it from California. And that's pretty exciting. Not a single person, not one, said anything negative to me about our kind of spiritual way of moving these things forward. But seriously, let's just call it what it is. The most important thing is not a single person said anything about the price. Not one. No one, it didn't matter if they were a student or owned a company, everyone agreed that they basically, the only thing was, we can't believe you can offer it at this price, but we thank you for doing it. And that was pretty exciting, because this has been a long journey, and we're here, and we're ready, and we want to work with people, and we don't purport to have all the right answers, but we're busting our butts every single day to at least have an answer, to at least try. To talk, I can't do this because I can't afford the tablets. I can't do this because I don't know. I can't do this because it doesn't fall for these standards. I can't. We're done with that. And honestly, that felt pretty great.
Yeah, no, you're right. Just as a takeoff on that real quick, the biggest, a lot of people have had probably similar ideas as far as, hey, we need to record digitally. I mean, there's been handheld devices and tablet computers and all kinds of stuff for 10, even 15 years, depending on the technology you look at. But the difference between doing it and the difference between doing it right and doing nothing at all is simply just taking that first step and doing it. And I feel like while other people are trying to do this thing, I don't feel like anybody's doing it exactly the way we are, because we're listening to firms, we're listening to people, and we're saying, okay, what are your problems? Oh, so buying tablets is a problem. Okay, we'll take that away. So, oh wait, I might break a tablet or something like that, or a field tech might, leave it on the back of a truck or something as they drive down the road, and now it's stuck in the desert. Okay, so we'll take that away. So we'll fix that for you. And well, what if Apple sends out iOS 9.6 and it breaks everything? All right, well we'll take that burden away as well. So we listen to you and we say, all right, let's just take it all away and get you back to doing archaeology. I firmly believe that no other company is doing that, and that's the biggest difference right there. Is our entire philosophy and business model. So, as Michael said, Chris, what was your response to Codifi? I know you were a lot of times working on the APN side there, and proselytizing on that side. But what was your response to people talking about Codifi?
Yeah. So like you had mentioned, my time in the exhibition hall was spent predominantly by the APN booth. But as everybody says, the real conference happens outside the conference. And, you guys were doing that in the exhibition hall. And when I would cut out after, the day in the exhibition hall, I'd go and meet up with other friends and archaeologists and talk to them, over dinner, over drinks and stuff like that. And they were just, their minds were blown. And there's no exaggeration to that. When I started to explain what Codify was and what it did, jaws actually dropped. And Codify, as we've been developing this, our first pitches have been to CRM firms in the West. And as you guys touched on earlier in this episode, we've had some really surprising responses and very positive responses from archaeologists in Canada and in the UK and in other parts of the country. And I had, several academic several archaeologists who run large academic projects saying that they wanted it, that they needed it for their work. And I think the same principles apply. Codify's strengths are in reducing overhead hours in make work. There are so many repetitive transcriptions that go on in the standard workflow for most recording that happens in the field in archaeology, and Codify eliminates a lot of that. And when you're a CRM firm and you're looking at overhead hours, that is an incredibly valuable tool to use. But when you're on an academic project, the same principles apply, because you're trying to make efficient use of your grant funding, and you're also trying to make efficient use of your what's an appropriate term for this, the labor of the grad students. And you don't want to waste the valuable time of grad students and burn them out on busy work by having them spend hundreds of hours transcribing things that can be done with literally the click of one button in Codify. And I'm talking about the photo logs. Killing photo logs, or rather automating them, is incredible. And when Michael first told me about that capacity, it almost brought a tear to my eye, because I thought of the hundreds and hundreds of hours I've spent transcribing photo logs. And it's my favorite thing to demo to people in the booth. And I carried my iPad around in my bag with me after hours, and I was just like overjoyed, just like giddy, jumping at the bit to try and get people to watch me make the photo log with one click of a button. And that was when jaws dropped. They were like, wait, what? What did you just do? And so then I'd show them the way that Codify produces the photo sheets that are already captioned and already formatted to just be slotted into your report. And that's the kind of thing. I'm going to be taking this to Belize with me to work on a Maya site this summer. And I already have some people who are just stoked out of their minds to get their hands on this thing. So it's been really exciting to see the reactions, but also to be a part of developing this thing and making this thing happen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I couldn't agree more. The response was phenomenal. And like I said, the response from other nations was huge. I don't know if it was because this conference was in Canada or what, but we talked to definitely a bunch of Canadians, bunch of Canadian firms, but I also talked to lots of people working in Mexico. Not like, like field schools in Mexico, like actual Mexican citizens, working at universities down there, and one guy from Argentina too. So let's go all the way down south, and just people from all over the world. And the UK, there were a handful of people from the UK there that we had really positive conversations with, like Michael mentioned earlier, and it was just we've always said that Codify, if we get your forms, it's just a template at this point, and we can put it into Codify, because we've been saying for on previous podcasts, and we say all over everything every time we talk to somebody that archaeology, we did the murder map for the country for United States in archaeology, and really you're recording the same elements of every archaeological site anywhere in the states. But that really translates to the entire planet. If that translates to Mars, for that matter, I mean, the same things are going to be there. Features artifacts, and whatever. If we were to go to the moon right now, Chris, and do a CRM project on the moon landing sites, we would record literally the same things that we would record here. And I don't care where you are, it's all the same. And once you start making that realization, you can do really powerful things with software.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I had a lot of FaceTime with Bill Octor, and I was happy to, finally meet him in person and gain him as a friend and have a lot of conversations about CRM. I learned a lot about telecommunications projects and all that, and I had not been thinking of it as deeply as he does, but some of the strengths that he saw already right off the bat in Codify are the ability to handle any sort of form that needs to be developed. Codify is working on, like you had mentioned, the murder map of all the states, but what's contained in that murder map is all the forms that have to be filled out and submitted. And the thing that Michael and I were talking about on our drive time was the lifespan of data as you collect it in the field to the time that it gets entered into whatever form it is. As it stands now, goes through a wild journey. It's almost like like a Finding Nemo or Finding Dory journey, because it just like it goes into paper on glass for a lot of the other apps that are trying to do stuff like this. It goes onto paper and glass and largely takes the same journey that it does in a notebook. It sits in a backpack, it sits on someone's desk, it travels around through folders on people's computers, and then finally it makes it into a report after being transcribed and copied and pasted and moved around. But the way Codify does is just this seamless process that goes from start to finish. The first time you gather that data, the first time you enter it in the field, the first time you fill it out in the lab, whatever that may be, it's already on the journey to the final destination. It's not going through this meandering path.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts here. Like I said, Codify is at like 9.9 point infinity. I mean, it's shockingly close to being finished. It really is just doing some polishing and final touches. We're at the point, like in a car buying analogy, where you've bought the car, you've been with the horrible person that adds $7,000, although we're not doing that, and then they're just cleaning it up for you. That's what we're doing. They're cleaning it up for you and they're getting ready. So Michael, in the last few minutes of the podcast here, why don't you just give us the final details on Codify Caption, Codify CRM, and all the things?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're nailing it down. Again, this is a couple quick things just so we can all understand how we roll. Okay, this is again has not been some journey to try to figure out how to make the next unicorn in Silicon Valley. This is about us trying to level up archaeology. So the way we worked is a couple years ago, when SAA was at San Francisco, we had a paperless archaeology workshop. It was absolutely fantastic. And Albion Environmental came and they said, when you're ready, we're ready, and we want to be one of the first. And so Albion, now a women-owned and operated company, a local company in California, is going to be the first. And it's a perfect scenario for us. So they put down a deposit. We were able to do what we do, and I'll explain that in just a second, to get things all ready for them. And it's a field school, is their first project. It happened to work out that way at the Castro Adobe in Watsonville, along with UC Santa Cruz, and supported by the Friends of the State Parks and all these things. So for us, it couldn't get better than that. We get to work on unique ways that Albion does their own business, things around how they manage tools and registers, ethnographic interviews, student diaries, as well as phase 1 survey and excavation, and tons of stuff with labs. They want to try to do everything. So how we work with Codify is we come up, and the very first thing we do with you is what we call a data therapy session. It just takes about an hour. We assess the forms. We ground truth your ideas of how the data that you collect needs to be transformed into however you want it to be produced. Sometimes that's forms, as Sims was just saying, but sometimes it's XML data or whatever it might be. Now, basically, Codify is a product. It is a physical hardware configuration of iPads and GPS units and boxes and photo boards, boxes to hold it all and photo boards. It is software. It is Codify, which has, and in a future episode, or if you go to our site, we'll explain all the details of how that all works. So you feel super great and secure about knowing that it's your data, but it's also these public good templates around the California DPR forms, or the IMEX forms in the middle of the country, or the recordation forms for Canada. And ultimately, there will be things that you as an organization or individual want to keep for yourselves. And that's the beautiful thing about what we've done, is you actually can do that too. We think it's really okay to be special, and for that, we will consult with you and configure Codify to do those things. So how it works is, like, we're first come, first serve. We're going to work with projects and organizations that we know that we can support. And it starts now. So by the time this podcast comes out, if you are interested in Codify at any level, we would suggest you get in touch, because a lot of people, I just laid out all the cards on my stand-up desk here, and there's a lot going on. We're not saying that to be, jerks about this. There is a lot of interest, and we're really excited. So if you're interested in going paperless and saving money and trying to do something, we want to hear from you.
Absolutely. I don't have the sound of a mic dropping. I don't. I need sound effects. Nice. Well, definitely.
I can't afford to have my mic drop, so I dropped it and then I caught it, because that's what we do. We catch. But if you drop Codify, if you drop your iPad on the ground, that's okay. We got your back.
We got your back. That's right.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, with that, I mean, honestly, we'd love feedback. We want to know, like, exactly what the photo boards. Where are you working? What are you doing? Can you provide us some? Are you willing to work with us and provide us some information on where you're working? If you're not one of the places we've talked about in this episode, you're working in, I don't know, Australia or China, for that matter. It doesn't matter. It might take us a little while to translate everything into Chinese, but we'll get somebody to do that. But anyway,
actually, did you know that one of our cards was Gary Guan, who's the managing editor of the Chinese Cultural Relics project?
I know.
His card happens to be in Chinese, I'm pretty sure.
The one side of it is. I saw that card.
I had a great conversation with him about bringing podcasts to China and vice versa, getting Chinese research, translated to English and brought to English speaking podcasts. So it was a really great conversation with him. And that's a whole new ball game over there. But Michael, I think a question for listeners who probably didn't get the advantage of the FaceTime with you at the exhibition hall. Where's the starting point? Where can they reach you? Where can they jump on board? And what is the first step that you're going to suggest that they take?
I mean, they can certainly just go to Codify, Codifi.com. But if they go to codify.com/paperless, PAPERLESS, that's the little page we're going to keep all of our energy and focus on right now. But seriously, just reach out, and we will set appointments. I mean, again, yes, as Chris said, we need to survive and eat, but we will always make time, always. And we spend half an hour, and happily help. If we can help you in some form of way, we want to do that. And if you have ideas you think we're full of crap, you should let us know, and we'll keep working to make it better. But the very short answer is just basically come to codify.com/paperless. We have a link there for our calendar schedule. Make an appointment, and let's get started.
Absolutely. And we'll have all those links in the show notes for this episode at arcpodnet.com/archaeotech/50. Note that arcpodnet.com is a new URL that we bought because I was tired of typing in archaeologypodcastnetwork.com every single time. So I finally, after like 2.5 years, bought arcpodnet.com. So anyway, like I said, links in the show notes. Check out ideas.codify.com to leave your ideas. You can do anything you want. Hell, if you design a new photo board for us, we might even give you one of them for free. How about that? do all the hard work and get something for it. That's a novel concept. So anyway, yeah, check that out. And thanks to everybody that came up to us at the SAAs. Just a quick note about Archaeotech. I think, and I heard this from Rachel, who was our person kind of out in front of the booth most of the time. Anybody that came up to talk about the APN said that they heard about us through Archaeotech. And that Archaeotech was like their gateway drug. I don't know if it's because we had a captive audience of all archaeologists there and technology, and when you know archaeology and you know technology, you come to the Codifi booth. So maybe Archaeotech was like the logical podcast for them to find us through. But thanks everybody that listens to this show and that kind of spreads the gospel, for lack of a better word, about Archaeotech and about the APN. And seriously, if you have any suggestions for things we should cover, please let us know anywhere you see this podcast or anywhere you can find us, and we'll try to get to that. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I just once again want to parrot what Webby just said. It was really great to have some face-to-face interaction with listeners of the APN, listeners of this show and the other shows, and I'm incredibly appreciative of the conversations I got to have with anybody out there listening. And I got to record some podcasts with some of you, and a few people were inspired by the SAA to send some really kind words via email, and I've responded to all the email feedback for the shows. And send us emails. Stay tuned after the podcast for info on where to email. It's in the outro. But yeah, it's been really great, and I'm excited for the future. I know Michael and Chris, you guys are both excited, and I can tell the listeners and the people who came to talk to us at the booth were also really excited. One of my favorite bits of feedback that I received while I was standing at the Codifi section of the booth was someone came up and said that they can't wait to see what we roll out in 2018 at the SAA in Washington, D.C., because they said that the booth was their favorite one in the exhibition hall. Nice.
Awesome. Well, expect a better Codifi lounge, because F you, IKEA. More on that later if you want to know. Just message me. It really hosed us at the end there. I mean, it's not that I waited till 2 hours before we set up in the exhibit hall to actually go buy the things I needed. That's beside the point. And
that's
really
totally exactly not the reason. They need to be a bit more clairvoyant next time.
Right. Anyway, again, thank you everybody. Thanks for all this. It was great. I noticed that there were two types of people in regards to the APN at the conference. People that either don't listen to podcasts at all, but now will because they discovered the APN. And two, super fans. I didn't meet very many people that listened to like one podcast. They're like, oh, I found this, and now I listened to 17 of them. So it was really great. So anyway, we'll kill this episode now. Go check out all the links in the show notes, especially go check out codifi.com. Leave us your feedback and give us all the ideas. And then go and, hit the shop page. Go get yourself a photo board using the coupon code APN Spring 20. And also, if you're a project manager or a PI, we'll be more than happy to help you out with a quote for what it would cost to go paperless with Codifi on one of your next projects. But you can also just do it right there on the website if you're ready to go. So, all right. Thanks, Michael. And thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Talk to you next time.
That's it for another episode of the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Archaeotech. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for this episode. You can also email us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag Archaeotech or tag @ArchPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to this show wherever you saw it. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and edited by Chris Sims.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
And I just had a huge brain fart, and I'll cut that out in editing. I was going somewhere with that, I promise.
Nice.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.